how Run-D.M.C. bum rushed the R&B charts in the 1980s. So I want to show you something. These were the top 50 artists in R&B in the 1980s. The list is found in Joe Whitburn's Hot R&B Songs book, one of my go-to sources for Billboard chart history. So here's the list again. Notice something? Who stands out? Look at the bottom of the list, number 50, Run-D.M.C. And what makes their number 50 listing so significant? Run-D.M.C. is the only rap artist on this list. The legendary rap group's number 50 ranking may not seem all that impressive, but in fact it was a very notable achievement and an inkling of a seismic shift in black music and culture that was soon to come. The 1980s was rap's first full decade, and while its popularity in the streets among primarily teens were picking up steam, the misunderstood phenomenon received little to no love in the music industry. Major record labels and black radio were powerful duo forces that harbored blatant disdain toward rap music. Joe Whitburn's 1980 Top 50 ranking is based on each artist's performance on Billboard's R&B charts. Of course, an artist has to be active to make appearances on the charts. And the first factor explaining how Run-D.M.C. made this R&B dominated Top 50 list is the group's heavy music activity in the 1980s. So first, here's an overview of Run-D.M.C's charted singles in the 80s. 19 of Run-D.M.C's songs made appearances on the R&B singles chart in the 80s, which certainly indicates solid activity. Only 3 of those singles reached the top 10, with My Adidas charting the highest at number 5. With that said, Run-D.M.C. had more songs on the R&B charts in the 80s than 18 of the R&B artists in the top 50 list. Now here's an overview of Run-D.M.C's album chart performance in the 80s. Run-D.M.C. released 4 albums in the 1980s. The group's 1984 self-titled debut album peaked at number 14. Their sophomore album, 1985's King of Rock, peaked at number 13. Run-D.M.C's monster third album, 1986's Raising Hell, peaked at number 1, spending 7 weeks total at the very top of the R&B album chart. The group's 4th studio album, 1988's Tougher Than Leather, spent 5 weeks at number 2 on the R&B albums chart. So, that's 4 top 15 albums during the 80s, 2 of which reached the top 3, with Tougher Than Leather's peaking at number 2 for over a month, and Raising Hell spending nearly 2 months at number 1. Run-D.M.C. had more top 15 albums in the 80s than 20 of the R&B artists on the top 50 list. Run-D.M.C's Raising Hell album spent 7 weeks at number 1 on the R&B albums chart. That's more weeks at number 1 than 33 of the other artists in the 80s top 50 list, who either had albums that spent fewer weeks at number 1 or didn't have a number 1 album during the 80s at all. So, if we rank the top 50 artists of the 80s solely based on the number of weeks their albums spent at number 1, Run-D.M.C. is tied with Aretha Franklin at number 11, just 1 spot below the top 10. Back in the day, Billboard chart positioning was driven primarily by 2 factors: radio play of singles and retail sales of both singles and albums. For Run-D.M.C., as well as other rap artists in the 1980s, radio play was hard to come by. But due to buzz on the streets, house and block parties, shows at the clubs, and the overall growing popularity of rap music among the youth, rap singles and albums sold surprisingly well and often better than R&B at retail. So I won't go into any depth about radio play because R&B artists clearly had that advantage working for them in the 1980s. But let's talk record sales. I'm going to estimate Run-D.M.C's singles and album sales in the 1980s based on RIAA gold and platinum certification data. Run-D.M.C had 2 certified platinum selling singles that were released in the 80s. Walk This Way with Aerosmith was certified platinum, and It's Tricky was eventually certified double platinum. Now let's look at the estimated sales of the group's 80s albums. The group's debut album was certified gold 8 days before Christmas in 1984. King of Rock was certified platinum in February of 1987. Tougher Than Leather was certified platinum in July of 1988. And the group's classic, iconic 1986 album Raising Hell was certified a very impressive 3 times platinum in April 1987. Now I'm about to show you the only R&B artist from Joe Whitburn's 1980s Top 50 list who had at least one album released in the 80s that sold more than Run-D.M.C's classic album, Raising Hell. This is it. I don't think I need to say their names. We all know who they are. And as you can see, these were not just R&B stars. These were superstars, pop culture icons. Now I should note, the Pointer Sisters' 1983 album Breakout sold as many copies as Run-D.M.C's Raising Hell. The album was certified triple platinum at the end of 1985. And Luther Vandross's 1989 Best Of album was eventually certified triple platinum, but not until 1997. Several other R&B artists in this top 50 list certainly had triple platinum plus selling albums, but those projects were released before or after the 1980s and or officially certified after the 1980s. But anyway, just to review, Run-D.M.C had 4 certified albums in the 80s, 1 gold album, 2 platinum albums, and 1 triple platinum album, and sold a total of approximately 5.5 million album copies during that decade. The main point of the chart and sales data overview was to show just how impactful and influential Run-D.M.C's music was within the 80s R&B market. Industry movers and shakers, music critics and commentators, and tuned-in fans who were paying attention clearly saw a tide turning in the world of black music in the mid and late 80s. With that said, arguably the biggest factor explaining Run-D.M.C's popularity in the 1980s is the group's crossover effect. Run-D.M.C sold records to a broader audience, meaning white youth, a feat not easily or even often achieved by most R&B artists during that time. In fact, Run-D.M.C's early breakthrough success in attracting a broader audience paved the way for other artists during the golden age of rap, like Def Jam label mate LL Cool J for example, to cross over, and to do so eventually on a much larger scale. Essentially, this explosive southern popularity of rap during its golden age era is what led to rap music pulling off a complete takeover of both the R&B and pop charts respectively by the early 2000s, when nearly half of the top 50 artists on the R&B charts were rappers. and this is a subject I'll be diving into in future videos. But with that said, it all started with the trio that you see in the middle of this famous picture. Run-D.M.C, the rap group that bum rushed the R&B music scene in the 1980s. Thanks for joining me. Make sure you hit the like button if you enjoyed this video. And here's my personal invitation. Subscribe to this channel and then share this video with your friends. Hit the bell in order to be instantly notified when new videos are released. Your support is greatly appreciated. Here at Soulful Charts, we got the receipts. Thanks for joining me. Peace.